Hello everyone. In the previous video, we just understood the overview about consumer behavior, and in this video lecture, we will try to understand what exactly consumer behavior is, why understanding consumer behavior is important for a marketer, and we shall also understand the buying roles of a consumer, difference between consumer and customer. So first off, let us try to understand what consumer behavior is. So consumer behavior is the mental and physical activities that is undertaken by household customers or business customers and which results in business actions to pay for purchase or use product and services. So if you look at the customer types, roles and behaviors, so basically there are two types of customers. One is the household customers and the other one is the business customers. So household customers, they purchase goods for their own consumption, but businesses are not so. The end user for business consumers are not really the business consumers. And this impacts what? The buying behavior. Basically, the mental activity and the physical activity impacts the buying behavior. And there are certain roles which are played by the consumer. It can be buyer, payer, and the user. So it is not necessary that always the user will be the buyer of the product or the payer of the product. So consumer plays different types of roles. So conventionally, if you look at consumer behavior, the term consumer has referred to household markets and corresponding term for the business market has been customer. So in the household market, it is called as consumer, but in the business market, it is referred to as customer. In a marketplace transaction, a customer can play one or all the three of the following roles. A buyer, so buyer is someone who selects a product. Payer, who pays money for buying that product. And user or a consumer is the final one to consume that product. So now let us understand the consumer behavior domain. So a consumer can be divided into two, like I said before, household consumer and the business consumer. Again, so further, household and business consumer can be divided into two. So that is based upon whether they are product or whether they are offering the services. So consumer product, it is the daily household consume goods that a family consume on a daily basis. It can be FMCG goods or soaps, milk, and so on. For a business product, the product can be a photocopier machine, a printer. So all these are the products for the businesses. And if you look at the services, to give an example for consumer service, it can be grooming, a parlor, a beauty parlor. And for business services, it can be a recruiting agency or a consultancy companies. Okay. So under consumer behavior domain, the consumer can be differentiated into two. One is household consumer and the other one is the business consumer. Further, household consumer and business consumers are divided into two based upon whether they are offering or buying product or service. Now, let us try to understand the difference between customer and a consumer because it's quite similar and most of us tend to find it very difficult to actually differentiate between a consumer and a customer. The term consumer is used for both personal consumer and the organizational consumers. So organizational consumers are also called as the business consumers. So personal consumers buy goods and services for their personal use or the household consumption, for example, sugar, furniture. Okay. And the other category of consumer is the organizational consumer, which includes profit or non-profit organization, government agencies, institutions. It can be local or state government, schools, hospitals. So they buy products, equipment and services required for running these organizations. And manufacturing firms buy raw materials to produce and sell their own goods. Okay. This is actually the difference between a customer and a consumer. A customer is one who purchases the goods, but consumer is someone who is the end user of the product. Customer has the ability to resell the product. He procures raw materials from a company and he can resell the finished goods to a consumer. But consumers are unable to resell products. Even though they can resell, but the basic motto of buying a product is not to resell. Next, if you look at the need for purchase of goods or services, customers need to purchase a product or services is in order to use it. For consumer, purchasing a product or services is not so essential. And motive of buying is for resale or maybe for their own consumption. But if you look at consumers, it is solely for their own consumption. And if you look at the payment, so the payment has to be made by the customer, and if you look at the consumer, it is not necessarily the payment has to be made by the consumer. So if a dad is buying his son or daughter a bicycle, then the user becomes the kid and the buyer becomes their parents or the dad. Okay, so here under customer, the target audience are an individual and company. So number of people, those who come under the customer category in business segment are very less when compared to the consumer segment. Because under consumer segment, they cater to vast category of customers. Now let us see what buyers really are and what are the roles that are played by the buyers and the users. The person who buys a particular product may not necessarily be the user of the product or the only user of the product. Likewise, it is also true that the person who purchases a product may not be the decision maker as well. So if you look, for example, uh, father buys bicycle for his son, a school going son. So son becomes the user and father becomes the buyer of that product, and he buys a pack of toothpaste. So the toothpaste is used by the entire family and the consumers are the entire family, and mother is a decision maker when she buys a dress for her kid. Okay, so it is not necessary that just because the mother is a decision maker, a buyer needs to be mom. No, it is not so. The husband and wife together may purchase a car, so both share the decision. So from this example, it is clear that in all cases, buyers are not necessarily the users of the products they buy. They also may not be the persons who make the product selection decision. If you look at the buying roles, so there are six types of roles which are played by a consumer. So whenever consumer behavior occurs in the context of multi-person household, several different tasks or roles as mentioned in the table, so they may be performed in acquiring and consuming product or services. So there are various roles starting from initiator, gatekeeper, influencer, decider, buyer, and finally the user. If you look at initiator, so initiator is someone who determines that some need or want is not being fulfilled. So initiator is a person who really feels there is need to buy this product because there is a problem and the problem has to be solved. So this person initiates the need. And next is gatekeeper. So gatekeeper is someone who processes the information, and gatekeeper has the greatest expertise in acquiring and evaluating the information. So the gatekeeper role is to know whether the information is important, and he or she may pass it on to the decision maker. Next we have next buying role, which is influencer. So influencer is a person who by some intentional or unintentional word or action influences the buying decision. So his word has a greater impact on the purchase of the good. So he influences. So majorly, even though the initiator initiated the need for the product, influencer has a greater impact whether to buy a product or not to buy a product. And next is decider. So decider is a person who actually determines which product or services will be chosen. And next is buyer. So buyer is an individual who actually makes a purchase transaction. So in the previous example, dad purchasing a bicycle for a school going kid. So here the buyer is the dad and initiator can be the kid because he felt a need that he can cycle to his school, which is very healthy, and the dad decided to go with bicycle, and he finally bought it. And the user becomes the kid and not the dad. So user is a person who is directly involved in the consumption or the use of the product which is purchased. So that's it for today's video. In the next video, we shall understand more about the consumer behavior. Thank you very much.